Hello and welcome to Just Jets episode number 178. What is going on? I am Matt O'Leary, going to be hanging out with you for the training camp preview episode. Are you pinching yourself? Are you sitting down? New York Jets football is back finally with training camp. Players are reporting today. Things are oh so good. We'll get into that, your audio files, your voicemails, but before all of that, cannonball this summer. It's not about the size of those cannonballs. It's about making a splash with our friends over at Manscaped. Prep for the barbecue season by making sure your grill master has the hottest dogs this summer has ever seen. When you're at the cookout, let the meat speak for itself with Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. It's time to get ready and not so much sweaty by going to manscaped.com using my code JETS20, that is JETS20 for 20% off and free shipping. You know what? Maybe pick yourself up the cologne too, because that's in my rotation. That is one of my favorite colognes to go and use. And fun fact, I am actually wearing it today. So there you go. I am excited to hop into this episode because, as I mentioned, training camp is finally here. It's been a long off season, and I'm not complaining because obviously it was a good one. The New York Jets land a new quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, someone who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So that's obviously exciting. It's been there's been a ton of things to talk about and a ton of things to cover, but I am just so ready for football to be back. And the videos that I'll be making will be on things actually happening on a field. Is it in an actual game? No, not yet, but it is still. Obviously, it's still going to count. I'm going to count it as something that's worthwhile to keep an eye on. But I just want to go through and preview training camp and things that I think will be important to look for. We got official word that Hard Knocks is going to be in the mix. More on that in a little while. But here's what, forget the storylines from One Jets Drive. Forget storylines from Hard Knocks. These are the Matt O'Leary storylines. These are the things that I am most interested in seeing in training camp. And we'll start with the offensive line, which is a no-brainer. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about it this offseason. I understand it, but it is going to be something that we are going to have to keep a very close eye on over the next few weeks to hint out where this offensive line ends up. So there is a quasi-semi battle for left tackle, if you want to call it that. I won't call it that because I don't think Mekhi Becton has much of a chance to beat out Dwayne Brown. I think more than likely Dwayne Brown will be the starting left tackle. It will be most dependent on Dwayne Brown's health. If for whatever reason he is unable to go, then I think that's a time where Mekhi could sneak in and steal that job. There's no doubt that Mekhi has an incredibly high ceiling. The floor is low because unfortunately he's missed the last 2 years. He's played one game in the last 2 seasons. And to just say, yep, he's going to be back to what he was as a rookie and practically maybe even better because of the lost weight. Like, I understand the weight loss and I'm excited for him. I'm happy for him with the weight loss. I just don't think you could sit there and pencil him in as a definite number one starting left tackle. I'm rooting for him to remain healthy. And I think really the biggest storyline is not who plays left tackle. I think that's going to be Dwayne Brown. Instead, I think it's who gets this right tackle job. And I do think Mekhi Becton wins this job. That would be my educated guess. I think that I know he's pushed back a little bit on playing the position, but when you really look at it, he is their best option to play at right tackle. When you take into consideration, I'm not going to include Carter Warren because I don't look at him as a realistic option in the short term, at least. He's more of a developmental guy, I would think, and projects more as a backup left tackle in my eyes. But story for another day. Dwayne Brown, left tackle, Mekhi Becton versus Max Mitchell versus potentially Billy Turner. I think, number one, the Jets liked Max Mitchell from last year. They drafted him for a reason, and he was okay when he came in. Was he great? No, he wasn't. He exceeded our expectations because our expectations were pretty low for a fourth-round rookie who really was more of a project and probably was supposed to be a swing tackle. But I say don't sleep on Billy Turner in this competition, and that's not what I want to happen. And that's not my prediction to happen. I'll come out and say right now, I think it's going to be Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson, Joe Tippmann at center, right guard AVT, right tackle Mekhi Becton. That is my official predictions, which we'll see how true that ends up being. But The offensive staff loves the veterans. And Billy Turner is just that. He's that savvy veteran. He has starting experience at both guard and tackle. He has starting experience with Aaron Rodgers and is someone that Aaron Rodgers trusts. And most importantly, even more so than the Aaron Rodgers connection, is the Nathaniel Hackett connection, because he followed Nate Hackett to Denver. It's not like he was in Green Bay this entire time and he's just Aaron Rodgers' guy. No, he's Nathaniel Hackett's guy, because he was there and started games in Green Bay when Hackett was there, and then Hackett takes him to Denver and he starts some games there. And is he good depth? And would I be okay with him having to come in and play, I don't know, we'll call it 2 games if need be? Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I don't think he should be the opening day starter, and I really hope that's not the case for this Jets team. I hope in training camp that we see Mekhi Becton come out and be a dominant player. Because unfortunately, even if you want to go back to 2021 in training camp when Mekhi was healthy before the injury in week 1 against the Carolina Panthers, Mekhi Becton did not have a very good training camp. Carl Lawson was dominating him day in and day out, so much so that they ended up having to take Carl Lawson out of certain drills so that the offensive line could actually get the protection and they could run plays in it, which is crazy to me. But I still, at the end of the day, I think the most likely scenario and the best scenario is having both Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton both on the field. And then, not really much of a debate how the guards are going to play out. AVT will slot in at 1. Laken Tomlinson will slot in at 1 as well. Center, can't forget about the Joe Tippmann versus Connor McGovern. Connor McGovern has started for the New York Jets each of the last 3 seasons. He hits the open market. I wrongly, I thought he was going to get a raise off of what he was originally given. He's an okay starting center, and starting caliber centers don't necessarily hit the market. Some fans, I think, overrate him. Some fans, I think, underrate him. I don't think he is terrible. I don't think he is great. I think he's okay. I think he's somewhere around the middle of the pack as a starting center. But he gets brought back for backup money. Incredibly cheap contract for our guy, Connor McGovern. And then the Jets use a high second-round pick on Joe Tippmann, the center. And I like Joe Tippmann a ton. I think he has a legit chance to start right away and be good right away, because of his athleticism. That's why the New York Jets drafted him, and that's where I think he has a leg up on Connor McGovern, is I think Joe Tippmann is going to be able to get out in space in this wide zone run concept offense and just be downright dominant, throwing guys around with AVT and Mekhi Becton. Like that from center to the right side of the offensive line, if it is Tippmann, AVT, and then Mekhi Becton, good Lord, good luck. Just put Breece Hall or anyone. Put me back there. I could run the football and gain 5 yards a pop, I think, behind that right side of the offensive line. I might fumble when I get hit, but they'll clear a path, and you could wheelchair somebody through there. I think that's going to be the strength of this line. Will end up being the right side, especially in the run game. And the Jets will run the football. They don't expect them to come out and throw 50 times a game just because they have Aaron Rodgers. That's not going to be the case. I think, he'll live more weeks than not in that 32 to 38 range, 32 to 38 attempts a week, and they're running the ball a lot as well. So offensive line shakeout is definitely a storyline that is worth keeping a close eye on, as is who ends up being this team's wide receiver 6. Is this the end of the line for Denzel Mims? Green Bean, I know you're listening. He is one of my most loyal listeners. I love him to death, but this might be the end of the line for our guy, Denzel Mims, who the Jets took in the second round of the 2020 draft. I was a big fan of Denzel Mims' game. I thought he was a late first round pick, early second round pick guy. He ends up going to the Jets later in the second round. Showed some flashes, then fell out of favor with the new regime. And now with Nathaniel Hackett in there, you kind of get 2 sides of the coin. One, the people who are still holding on to their stock and saying, this is it, he's finally going to be freed. And the other people are like, he still can't get in the good graces of Nathaniel Hackett and the rest of the staff. It's over. Let's try somebody else. And while that's incredibly harsh, and I don't really like to necessarily word it that way, when Denzel doesn't really give you much on special teams, to Denzel's credit, he has tried out special teams. It's not something that's a big strength of his because he didn't do it a ton. I think you are more likely to see someone who could give you special teams upside. The guy that I think is a dark horse to make this roster and potentially push off a Denzel Mims would be a Jason Brownlee. Undrafted free agent wide receiver, does have special teams experience, is a bigger receiver, so kind of fits the same mold that Denzel is, and a contested catch guy, but this version, or this staff's version of that player, for whatever reason, it hasn't clicked for Denzel. Maybe the light switch magically goes on. I would hope so. I like the kid a lot. I want him to get a chance, and I want him to, be something at this level in the NFL. But you get to a point, it's put up or shut up time for that 2020 class, and I have more on that in a second here. But the top 5 of the wide receivers are already set in stone, and not in any particular order, but we'll go Garrett, Allen Lazard, Corey Davis, Mecole Hardman, and Randall Cobb. Those 5, in whatever order you want to put them in, are going to be the top 5 receivers for the New York Jets. And there's probably one more spot up for grabs. And I like Brownlee, but I'm going to keep an eye out. That's something throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. We're going to have to watch closely who's getting the reps, who's playing the best in the preseason games. And when we're there, right, when we're there watching, because I'll be there for the Hall of Fame game, and I'm sure a lot of people are as well going to be there for the Hall of Fame game. By the way, if you haven't already, make sure to come to our little get-together on Friday night. Not that you could, but if you didn't know about it, I guess is a better way to say it. On Friday night at Jersey's, we're doing a hangout for anybody who is going to be in the area. I'll put the flyer up on the screen. It is myself, Boy Green, Jay Gasman, and a group of Jet fans. So come hang. And yeah, it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, during that game, the Hall of Fame, and the rest of the other preseason weeks, I'm looking at that wide receiver room and seeing who wins that last job or two. And speaking of the 2020 class, guys like Denzel Mims, Mekhi Becton, Bryce Hall, Ashton Davis, this is the last call. This is the last call. It is put up or shut up time. All of these guys are going into last year of their deal because Mekhi Becton did not get the 5th-year option picked up. None of these guys have been extended. Do they make the team? Mekhi Becton will be on the team in some capacity. He may or may not be a starter. I think he has the best chance to revive some of this draft class, but Denzel Mims, a player I was once high on, doesn't look like he's long for this roster. Same with Bryce Hall. I liked Bryce Hall as a starter in his first couple of years in the league in 2020 and 2021. Then they go out, they bring in DJ Reed, they draft Sauce Gardner. They drafted Brandon Echols actually in 2021, and for whatever reason, the staff likes Brandon Echols a lot more than they like Bryce Hall, it feels like. So could he be the odd man out now that they bring back Javelin Guidry and now that they add Jarek Bernard-Converse in the NFL draft as well? Like, Bryce Hall might not have a roster spot. He's good depth because he has starting experience, but there's only so many spots you could keep. Ashton Davis, I mean, he'll give you special teams value, but the safety position's another one, man. Like that, behind the 2 starters, you have Whitehead and Amos. And after that, your guess is as good as mine as who's going to be the next guy up. Tony Adams is someone who comes up a lot. It could be Ashton Davis. But I don't really know how much stock I put into that. It could be Bernard-Converse switching from corner to safety. That's something else that's been talked about a ton. But this 2020 class, it's getting late early around here, as Yogi Berra would say. It's last call, put up or shut up time for that class. Zach Wilson. I know we don't want to talk about him as much as what we have over the last few years because he's not the starting quarterback, and I would much rather and I'm much happier to talk about Aaron Rodgers leading this team. But you're going to be watching Zach Wilson closely in training camp and in the preseason games. Because let's be honest, do you expect Aaron Rodgers to play in the preseason? If so, it's going to be an incredibly limited number. It is going to be an incredibly limited number of snaps. So don't get your hopes up of seeing much of Aaron Rodgers. And it's going to be a lot of Zach Wilson. It's going to be a lot of Tim Boyle. It's going to be a lot of Chris Streveler. And to me, you got to see what the hell is Zach Wilson now in year 3. Can he put anything together? Because consistency has been his biggest issue over the last 2 years he's been in the league. He has talent. There is no denying that the kid has talent. He is just has been so mentally broken and beaten down. Can he revive himself and at least give you competent backup Because no one's asking him right now, at least. No one's asking him to be the guy that you thought you were getting when you took him second overall. You're saying, can you be like, I don't know, what's a good backup? The 40th best quarterback in the NFL? The 45th best quarterback in the NFL? And just be like, passable? Maybe, if God forbid, Aaron Rodgers misses a game, can you come in, throw a touchdown, no interceptions, throw for $180 and get out of there? Like that would be the plan, I would think. And he's at times showed that he could do it. Against Buffalo last year, I thought he played a pretty good game. He had a similar stat line to that. But then what you don't want is the meltdown, the 3 interception game, or the I can't complete a pass game. And it's like, now you can't move your offense and you can't function. Can he be a functioning NFL quarterback? That is something that we will see in the preseason. I think it'll be pretty obvious right away whether or not there's been any sort of change. If screen passes are getting sailed or skipped, or throws are behind the mark, or he's sailing throws, like it will be pretty obvious where he's at. And in minicamp, unfortunately, or I don't know if minicamp, OTAs, I guess is the better way to say it, because they technically canceled, I think, their minicamp because they were reporting so early. He had good days and he had bad days. So it was the continuation of the roller coaster ride that has been Zach Wilson through 3 years in the NFL. And I hope that he proves himself as a QB too. That make life a hell of a lot easier. They're not going to just cut him. They can't. Maybe plays well and they flip him for a draft pick and then sign Teddy Bridgewater, something like that. Maybe. Is that a good case scenario? But you might not want to talk about it. You might say, oh, we're still talking about Zach Wilson. Didn't we move on from this? You have Aaron Rodgers now. Well, as the roster is currently constructed, he's quarterback 2. And you see a lot of quarterback 2, 3, and 4 in the preseason. So yeah, we're going to see him in training camp in the preseason. That's absolutely a storyline you got to watch. And then the last thing for me is if they add any other bodies. They signed Quinnen Williams at the end of last week, which is happy. We love that. Big fans of Quinnen Williams getting his extension. Well-deserved. But do they add a Dalvin Cook? Do they add a Quan Alexander? I am all for it. And continue to add depth. Maybe more so on the Quan front than the Dalvin Cook. I don't necessarily think the Jets need to add a veteran running back. They could if they really wanted to. And guys are, Dalvin's not the only one. There's a ton of veteran running backs still on the market. Unfortunately, we're seeing, these guys who are franchise tag not get paid. So it's not going to cost you a whole lot of money to bring one of these guys in. You could add somebody if that's what you want to do. I like the Jets youth. I think Michael Carter can bounce back this year. I think Bam Knight showed a lot of promise as a rookie, and I think Izzy Abanikanda is going to be a huge home run threat as a rookie, and Breece Hall is Breece Hall. So I'm excited to see if they continue to add anything. I would feel more comfortable with Kawan over Jamie Sherwood. I've explained why that is, but they have the flexibility to do that, which is most important. And who knows, maybe it's somebody else. I mean, we've been talking Dalvin Cook and Quan Alexander for 2 months, it feels like, right? Like, oh, bring him back. And I'm not opposed to it and bringing back Quan or signing Dalvin, but to me, it could easily be somebody else as well. It doesn't have to be one of those guys, and someone could become available who maybe you aren't anticipating becoming available right now. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting time with training camp finally here. Players are reporting as of today on Wednesday, so you absolutely love to see that. And yeah, I'm excited. I hope you are too. Let's get into the audio files. I have a few things that I want to play and discuss a little bit more. First is from Adam Schefter on Get Up on ESPN. He is talking about the New York Jets are going to be doing Hard Knocks a little bit differently, and then I want to react to that.
Well, again, the Jets fought it all along. They met with NFL Films and told them clear as day, we don't want to do this. And while you're all talking about the last time the Jets did it with Rex Ryan and Mike Tannenbaum, they were along for the ride. This group is not along for the ride. And Hard Knocks will not be the same because they're not going to be given the same access. The Jets don't believe it's humane to show players being released. So it would surprise me if we see them this summer. This is a partnership. This is a relationship. And the Jets are not interested in being partners with NFL Films, no matter what they say. So they're going to go in there because it is, as Aaron Rodgers says, being forced down their throats. But the Jets are not going to provide the level of cooperation that the Lions provided last year or that other teams have provided in other years. And essentially, in the end, because the Jets were unwilling to go along with it and because the Commanders don't have the new owner approved yet and the league couldn't go there, the league wanted to go to the Jets. The Jets didn't want it. That's why they waited until last week, because there was no other option. And the league said, essentially, the Jets, you're doing it. And that's the way it's going to go down.
There we go. So you get the little bit of a lot of takes from Adam Schefter on that. And not takes, but just explaining what happened there. And it's not any new information. We all knew. Robert Saleh said it at the podium. He had no interest of being on that show. But I like the change that they are making. Hard Knocks will not be the same this year. And some people are butthurt over it. They're all upset, like, oh my, we want the full behind the scenes. I want to see the undrafted free agent cry after getting cut. Like, what? Like, that's really the thing you take away from the show? Not me. I take away the other behind the scenes stuff from the practices, the players interacting, the coaches, all that. Like, I don't need to get some kids or see some kid's dream get crushed on national television in front of millions. And I respect that, because Joe Douglas, as a youngster, was on Hard Knocks back in, I think it was the first year, right? Maybe not the first year, but it was 2001, right after they won the Super Bowl. And he had to cut people because he was low on the totem pole. He would, Ozzie Newsome would call somebody and say, or let him know who you got to cut. And he did it. He had to do it on the show. But Saleh and Joe Douglas have made it clear that they want to change things and they want to do things a little bit differently, and they want to be player friendly, which isn't a bad thing. Aaron Rodgers wanting to come here because of the players that are here and the culture from Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, like, that stuff matters. Of course, now it's time to put wins attached to it. It's great. You can talk about changing the culture all you want. Eventually you have to win games, and now is that time. This is the year where you have to go out and win football games, but don't discredit what Douglas and Saleh have done in changing how this organization is perceived inside the league, at least. Maybe still the fans are going to want to say the same old Jets are just people who follow the NFL closely, but people inside the league, outside that one bozo NFC scout who basically just said the Jets are the Jets, it's different. Vibes are different around Florham Park, and I have no issue with this. I think this is a smart decision, and I have a lot of respect for Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas for making that decision. You know who else probably feels the same way? The players. You think the player wants to see themselves get cut or one of their friends get cut? No, we all know what happens. You don't need to see it. We don't need to see how they make the meat. It's crazy. Next up, I want to play a clip from the Turn on the Jets podcast. Will Parkinson, I'm sure if you're on Jets, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, you know who Will Parkinson is. He does a great job with his show over at Turn on the Jets and over with the Badlands guys. And he had John Franklin Myers on his show. And JFM talks about Aaron Rodgers and how he's already impacted the team in a positive way. I want to play it and react.
I mean, it probably... not too many people can say they've done that. And it definitely helps the morale of the team. It definitely helps even a guy like Zach. And, just seeing the strides he's made in OTAs, I mean, he looks extremely better. And seeing these guys talk in the locker room, I mean, that shit it's crazy, because that's what coming from the Rams in my rookie year, that's what we did. Like, all the vets in the room, I'm seeing Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters and stuff, and they're talking to the young guys and coaching them up in the locker room. I'm seeing Brock talking to me all the time in the locker room, and AD doing the same thing. So, I mean, that's just what I was used to. And then you get a younger team and you realize, like, it ain't too many of us that can talk, kind of out of turn and coach anybody up, because ain't nobody really did shit, And at the end of the day, like, a player-led team is a championship team, and that's what we're trying to get to, and that's what we've been trying to get to. The coaches understand that, and, obviously we see what type of roster we have now compared to even 2 years ago, and, I mean, it's night and day better, and there's
I love that from JFM, and thanks again for Turn on the Jets for that awesome interview. Good job, Will. I really appreciated what JFM had to say, specifically about Aaron Rodgers coming in and kind of being that little bit of a vocal leader, because he's right. Over the last couple of years, Jets haven't been super veteran heavy. CJ Mosley, the biggest vet, But he wasn't there in 2020, which I believe was JFM's first year with the Jets was 2020. It might be 2019. No, it was 2020, I believe, the waiver wire. That was an Adam Gase pickup, or it could have been Joe Douglas. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is talking about how now they have some veterans in there who could help and get back to that point, like where he was with the Rams, and there's all these, guys who've been there and have a ton of accolades in the league. And Rodgers brings that. And if he's helping Zach Wilson along, which that's what his teammate's saying, and granted it's on a podcast, he probably doesn't want to throw his teammate under the bus, that's great news. If you get anything out of Zach, that's just an added bonus, but you want to make sure he's competent, right? Because if God forbid you have to go to him, well, I hope he's not the guy that he was last year. Another last audio file before we do your voicemails. Jake Asman, the great Jake Asman, was on ESPN 98.7, ESPN New York. Love that for our guy, Jake Asman. He spoke to Nick Mangold about his former teammate going into the Hall of Fame.
Before we get to the current Jets, I want to ask you about Darrelle Revis, who, of course, 3 weeks from tonight is going to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. First ballot guy. You spent a lot of time with Darrelle. When you think back to his career, what are some of the things that stand out?
Well, I mean, obviously, great player and all that, but I think the biggest thing was the competitiveness, and I think that's what made him, that much more special. The fact that he would go out and he wouldn't want anybody to catch a ball on him, even in a walkthrough. And so I think seeing that kind of level of competing, the effort to make his craft the best that it could be, was pretty impressive.
You guys kind of came in together. You, of course, part of the draft the year before he was drafted. I mean, is there a sense of pride seeing a guy like Darrelle go in, knowing that you and him were kind of the faces of the offense and the defense during your time with the Jets?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it's somebody, I remember when it was time for contract time with me, DeBrickshaw, Darrelle, and Dave Harris. We kind of got our own little core four. And so that's a nice little bond to have there.
There we go. Love that. Thanks for Jake Asman for getting him on. That's a great get. And I like Nick's answer. And Nick is one of my favorite all-time Jets. Was with the team from 2006 through 2016. Was a great center, multiple-time Pro Bowler, an All-Pro, all that stuff. I think maybe could be a Hall of Famer one day. Would be just absolutely fantastic. But for Revis to get in, I don't know. The older generation, I hated, by the way, the Revis and Klecko beef. I hated that it was, the new school pinned against the old school. But for a lot of the younger demographic of Jet fans, like, myself, I'm in my late 20s, we had Curtis Martin go into the Hall of Fame. So that was cool. I saw Curtis at the tail end of his career, and he was still good. The 2004 season was one of the most electric seasons I've ever seen from a Jets player on offense, right up there with Garrett Wilson from last year and Brandon Marshall in 2015 and all the stuff like that. But, Revis, I remember where I was when he was drafted. I watched his entire career. I remember when he retired and now Hall of Fame eligible. It's different for someone my age to see someone go through that and through that career. And we relate more to guys like that, where I have no issue with, people who are a little bit older and maybe relate more to Joe Klecko because that was their guy growing up, or Mark Gastineau or whoever it may be. For people probably 30 and younger, Revis, Mangold, those are our guys. And we were kids when they were drafted, and we watched them, grow, have their career grow with the Jets. And that was really special. So I can't wait. Once again, we're gonna be out there. I'll be out there. Jake Asman will be as well. Boy Green. We're doing a little Jet fan gathering on Friday night out there. But we got the ceremony, we got the game. It should be a really nice weekend out in Canton, Ohio. Let's get into those voicemails now. We have a few to get into. We're gonna start with Derek from Montana. He's ready for the Super Bowl. Let's hear from our guy Derek.
Derek from Cattle Smell Montuck me. Go Jets. I can't wait for the season to go. I've been waiting since 1969 for another Super Bowl. I'm 63. Let's go, girls. Go Jets! Woo!
I love the passion. Anytime Derek calls in, I just love the passion that he brings. Fans have been waiting a long time. Long time. And, this is probably the most hyped up Jets team since that 2010 team where they were on Hard Knocks, ironically enough, and they went to the AFC Championship game again. And, unfortunately, we know how that season ended. They lost in Pittsburgh on the road, and That was as tough a loss as I've ever taken as a fandom of any of my teams, but specifically with the Jets, that one really, really stung. That team, felt special. That team stands out as, in my entire 20 years of watching Jets football, that is my favorite. The 2010 Jets are my favorite team. That was my favorite season by far. And having this knowledge and be right on the precipice of it, because you're going into training camp week of this year could really be special. It's exciting. We don't get a lot of those. There haven't been a lot of those. I feel that way about 2004, 2009, 10, a little bit with 2015, but like there was a nice, like 2015 and 2006 I put in as like, oh, those nice surprise seasons. Like the Jets, snuck into a playoff spot, went 10-6 and was a wild card team. Like, okay, yeah, that was cool. Or 2015, like, oh, pretty nice, a little bit of a fun stretch there in the middle of the season. But 2010 was different. 2004 kind of felt a little bit different also, but this team could really do some damage if they get into the playoffs, which I think that has to be the absolute floor, right? And maybe do some noise in there. Let's go to Vinny and Peekskill. He wants to talk about Quinnen and Asante running his mouth.
Hey, Matt. It's Vinny from Peekskill. I'm calling just as a news break of Quinnen Williams signing his new contract.
Sure.
I am excited. In fact, I am so excited, I'm going to give the Puerto Rican phrase for pure excitement. Rip headphone users. But, all right. So now let's get back on top. I wanted to comment on the ridiculousness of a certain former Patriot cornerback, whose name I will not mention. You know who I'm talking about. Coming out here, bashing our boy Sauce Gardner, trying to ignore facts when enough facts. He wants to live his own delusional reality. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, pathetic. Your argument is dead when you try to proclaim yourself as the greatest corner in football over guys like Revis, Primetime, and Dick Knight, Train Lane. I mean, just pathetic. Absolutely. I don't have much else to say, so that's it, and go Jets.
I love it. Vinny, your passion always makes me laugh. The weight pod was very good. I like the weight pod. So I've said this before on the channel. I used to work in radio, and one of the shows that I helped produce and run was there was a DJ who would come in, bring in their own stuff, but there was a Weight Pod Wednesday segment where it would be all like Latin and Spanish music and stuff like that. And it was awesome. So love bringing that in and your Puerto Rican flair with it. It's awesome. And as far as it goes with Asante, look, I think he's nuts. He was digging himself in a bigger hole for like 3-4 days. Finally, the tweets have stopped showing up on my timeline, so I'll count that as a win for myself. But he is absolutely delusional if he thinks that he is in the same stratosphere as Darrelle Revis. That's ridiculous. Crazy. Anyway, we're going to close out with Joe D calling in from Dix Hills, Long Island. I used to work in Dix Hills. Here we go.
Hey, Matt, this is Joe D. and Jason N. from Long Island, Dix Hills. I'm a big fan. I watch the show all the time. However, we just got back from the bar. We're about 10 deep. And we were both talking about the Jets this year and very excited. We have a question. We were thinking how good they could be this year and thinking about making plans to go to the Super Bowl, just making that plan now. And the question is, if we do make plans, let's say we just go to Vegas this year anyway, no matter what, and we do go and they lose, is it a total disaster? Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for calling in there. Appreciate it. Hope you guys had a fun night. That would be really, really, that would suck to see a loss in that spot. But that is a once in a lifetime experience. That whole that whole trip and getting out there and being in Vegas and saying you were at a game, like that is such a bucket list thing. I wouldn't call it a complete disaster. That, again, you obviously seeing a loss would be terribly, terribly, terribly painful. But if there was ever a place to see a loss like that, I think Vegas would be the place. I think you could be able to cheer yourself up a little bit, or maybe even dig yourself in a bigger hole. But hey, that is the fun of being out there in Vegas. So now if you're talking like, I don't know, you're in Minnesota and it's negative degrees in February and it's freezing walking back to your hotel room, yeah, that might be worse. That might be a little bit worse, but obviously not ideal. You'd love to see them win the game, but I think I wouldn't want to go in with that mentality. If, God forbid, that happened, you could still say that you went and saw a Super Bowl, which is something that not many people could say. You are in a very, very small minority of people who could say that. So I think that would be worth it. So training camp's here. That's going to do it for the episode. I am so amped up about training camp. I hope you are too. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get the show. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.